My name is Claire Whitmore, and I am 33 years old. 8 months ago, I sat in a lawyer's office and watched my parents hand my sister everything: the house, the family business, the trust fund, while I walked away with nothing. You've always made things difficult, Claire, my mother said, her voice flat and final. My sister didn't say a word. She just smiled at her lap. I stood up, looked her in the eye, and walked out without saying goodbye. Last week, my phone would not stop ringing. By the time I finally picked up, my mother was screaming and crying at the same time. The FBI is at Danielle's house. She sobbed. They're saying something about fraud and money laundering. Claire, what did she do with the money? I hadn't touched a single dollar of it. But my sister, the one who got everything, had made choices that were about to cost her far more than she ever imagined. Before I tell you how we got here, if you're the kind of person who believes families should be fair, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from tonight. I read every single one. Now let me take you back to where this all began. Growing up in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio, I was always the one standing just outside the circle of my own family. My sister Danielle was 4 years older. And for as long as I can remember, she was the sun everyone else orbited around. When Danielle graduated high school, my parents rented a hall and invited more than 100 guests. When I graduated 4 years later with honors, we went to a diner. Just the four of us. And my father checked his watch twice during dessert. When Danielle decided to stay home after high school and help with the family business, my father's custom furniture workshop, my parents bought her a car and helped her rent an apartment downtown. When I got accepted into Ohio State for accounting, my mother sighed on the phone and said, "We just can't help with tuition this time." Claire, you understand, don't you? I understood. I took out loans, worked 2 part-time jobs, and graduated with a 3.8 grade point average. My parents didn't come to the ceremony. "We can't leave the shop for a whole weekend," my mother explained. "Danielle can't run everything alone." That same weekend, Danielle posted photos from a wine tour with friends. I moved to Cincinnati, earned my CPA license, and built a career at a mid-sized accounting firm. I paid off every cent of my loans myself. I called home every Sunday. I sent birthday cards. I flew back for holidays whenever I could afford it. But every phone call followed the same script. "How's Danielle doing?" my mother would ask before I'd even said hello. Then, almost as an afterthought, "And how are you, honey?" The message was never subtle. Danielle stayed. So Danielle mattered. I left to build a life. So I was the one who'd abandon them. 2 years before everything fell apart, I actually tried to help. My mother called in a panic about a tax deadline. "Claire, you're the accountant. Can you look at our books? We're so behind." I flew home on my own dime and spent a Saturday at the kitchen table sorting through receipts and spreadsheets. That's when I noticed something strange: a string of large, undocumented cash withdrawals over the past year, totaling nearly $70,000. With nothing but vague notes scrawled in Danielle's handwriting, I found my mother in the living room. "Mom, I need to ask about these withdrawals. Where did this money go?" Her face went hard instantly. "That's business, Claire. Not your concern. If the IRS ever audits you, they'll want documentation for this." Danielle walked in with her arms crossed. "Are you seriously going through our private finances?" "Mom asked me to help with taxes." "Helping with taxes doesn't mean interrogating us." Danielle snapped. "You don't work here. You don't get to tell us how to run things." I kept my voice level. "I'm only saying that if the IRS asks, you'll need to show where that money came from. It's not optional." My mother stood up. "This is exactly why we stopped asking you for help. Claire, you always find a problem. You always make everything complicated. I'm trying to protect you both. We don't need your lectures." Danielle cut in. "We've run this business for 20 years. We know what we're doing." I closed my laptop. "Okay. I was just trying to help." My mother's voice softened only slightly. You mean well, Claire. But you're always so paranoid. Everything is fine. I flew home the next morning and never brought it up again. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning in early spring. Subject line: Times family meeting, your attendance required. It was from an attorney named Gerald Simmons, requesting my presence the following Friday at 10 in the morning at his office to discuss important estate matters. Estate matters. My father was 66 and healthy. My mother was 63 and still ran 3 miles every morning. Why on earth were we discussing an estate? I texted Danielle. No response for 3 hours. I called my mother that evening. Mom, I got an email from a lawyer. What's this about? Is someone sick? No one's sick, she said briskly. We just need to discuss some family business. Can you be there Friday? Can you at least tell me what it's about? 10 o'clock. Claire. Don't be late. She hung up before I could say another word. On the flight out, I let myself hope. Maybe they were finally setting up proper retirement accounts. Maybe they wanted to sell the business. Or maybe, and this thought made my chest tighten, maybe they were finally going to acknowledge what my grandmother's will had actually said. My grandmother, Ruth Calloway, had passed away 5 years earlier, leaving behind a trust fund she had built carefully over decades. At her funeral, I remembered her attorney mentioning something about an equal split between her 2 granddaughters. But my parents had handled everything afterward, and I had been too consumed by grief to ask questions. Maybe, I told myself, they were finally going to make it right. I should have known better. The law office sat in a modest brick building. I arrived 10 minutes early, hands cold despite the warm spring air. Through the glass wall of the conference room, I could already see them, my parents and Danielle, laughing with the attorney. Coffee cups in hand, a stack of folders neatly arranged on the table. No one had waited for me. I opened the door. 4 heads turned. Claire, you made it, my father said. Not times good to see you. Just a fact. I sat at the empty end of the table, the only spot without a folder in front of it. The attorney, Gerald Simmons, cleared his throat and began reading. The family residence, valued at approximately $950,000, will be transferred to Danielle Whitmore. My stomach dropped. That was the house I grew up in. The house where my grandmother had lived with us before she passed. The business, Whitmore Fine Furniture, including all assets and client contracts, will also transfer to Danielle. Additionally, the family trust fund, currently valued at $650,000, will be placed under Danielle's sole management. He turned the page. And for Claire Whitmore, no assets have been designated at this time. The silence was suffocating. I'm sorry. What I finally managed. My mother spoke before the attorney could respond. Claire, we've discussed this carefully as a family. This is what makes sense. I wasn't part of that discussion. Danielle has been here, my father said quietly, not meeting my eyes. She's helped with the business. She's been present. And I haven't been, because I built a career and a life for myself. Is that it? You chose your own path, my mother said. Danielle chose family. Family is about being there, my mother added, her tone hardening. You've always been difficult, Claire. Always questioning everything. Always making things complicated. Difficult. Because I'd gone to college. Because I'd built something on my own. When we needed help, you were in Cincinnati, my mother continued. When the business was struggling, you were busy with your career. Danielle was here every single day. I looked at my sister. She stared at her coffee cup, silent, offering nothing in my defense. Do you have anything to say? I asked her. She glanced up briefly. I think Mom and Dad made their decision. I stood, picked up my purse, and turned to her one last time. Congratulations, Danielle. I hope it all works out for you. I meant it. Too, not out of bitterness, but because some small, stubborn part of me still hoped my family could be decent. Her eyes widened slightly, like she hadn't expected that. Before I left, I paused at the door. Just out of curiosity, what happened to Grandma Ruth's trust? She left it for both of us. Equally. I remember that from the funeral. The room went completely still. My mother's expression hardened. That money went toward family expenses. The house. The business. Things that benefited everyone. Including you. I nodded slowly. Right. Everyone. And I walked out. If you've ever had a family member try to convince you that you imagined your own mistreatment, you already know the particular kind of exhaustion that follows. If that's you, I want you to know you're not crazy. And you're not alone. Let me keep going. That night, unable to sleep, I opened my laptop and searched my old email archive for my grandmother's attorney. I found it a message from 5 years earlier, sent 2 weeks after the funeral, with a copy of my grandmother's will attached. A courtesy I'd barely glanced at back then. Too raw with grief to focus. I opened the document with shaking hands and scrolled to the section on trust distribution. There it was. In plain legal language, a sum of $400,000 held in trust, to be divided equally between her 2 granddaughters. $200,000 each, to be distributed no later than 90 days following her death. 90 days. That had been 5 years ago. I had never received a check, a call, or even a letter explaining where my share had gone. I printed the entire document, labeled the folder, and placed it carefully in my desk drawer. Then I sat in the dark for a long time. 2 weeks after the meeting, Danielle posted a photo on social media, champagne glass raised in front of our childhood home. Captioned, "Officially mine. Thank you, Mum and Dad, for trusting me with our legacy." The likes poured in. My name appeared nowhere. A month later, my mother threw a party to celebrate Danielle becoming the official head of the family business. I found out from a video posted online. String lights. 30 guests. A banner reading times. Congratulations, Danielle. New CEO. No one had told me it was happening. When a cousin asked in the comments whether I'd been there, Danielle replied that I was too busy with work to make it. My mother never corrected her. 3 months after the meeting, Danielle called me for the first time since I'd walked out. "I need to borrow $20,000. She said. "The roof on the house is leaking. It's urgent. You have a trust fund worth $650,000. Danielle." A long pause. "It's tied up right now. In investments. Really good ones. They're just not liquid at the moment." "What kind of investments? That's not really your concern." I told her I didn't have that kind of money to lend. And she told me I'd always been selfish. I hung up without raising my voice. Something about the way she dodged every question stayed with me for days. Part 5. The call. 4 months after the meeting, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. It was an attorney named Patricia Voss, representing my late grandmother's estate. "We're conducting an audit of the trust distribution," she explained. "Records show you were designated to receive $200,000. Can you confirm whether you received those funds?" My heart started pounding. "No, I never received anything." There was a long pause and the sound of typing. "According to our records, the full amount was transferred to your father's account as trustee, with explicit instructions to distribute it to both granddaughters within 90 days. That was 5 years ago. What does that mean?" "It means I need to contact your parents immediately. Something is very wrong here." She called back 3 days later, her voice more clipped than before. "I've confirmed it. Your grandmother's will explicitly states an equal split. Your parents had no legal authority to redirect your portion." Then she paused. "I should also tell you I've noticed some irregular activity in the funds transferred to Danielle. Large withdrawals. Transfers to unfamiliar accounts. There may be tax implications. Possibly worse. I can't say more until I look further. And Claire, please don't discuss this with your family yet." I hadn't wanted a fight. I hadn't wanted revenge. I only wanted the truth. Now the truth was coming. Whether my family was ready for it or not. If you're still with me, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and telling the truth? Type yes below if you have. Because this next part is where everything changed. 6 months after that meeting in the law office, I was in a client meeting when my phone began buzzing nonstop against the table. By the time I checked it an hour later, I had over 40 missed calls and a string of increasingly frantic texts. The last one. From Danielle. Read times. The FBI is here. Call me now. I called my mother back immediately. She was sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. They're here. The FBI is at Danielle's house right now. They came with a warrant. They're taking the computers. The files. Everything. Why? Mom, what are they saying? Fraud. Money laundering. Claire. What did Danielle do with that trust money? I never touched that money. Mom. I never received $1 of it. She says you reported her. I didn't report anyone. I don't even know what's happening. I hung up and searched the local news. A headline had gone up 20 minutes earlier. Times federal agents raid local business owner's home in fraud investigation. The article described an alleged money laundering and investment fraud scheme, with the homeowner accused of transferring more than $500,000 into accounts linked to the operation. $500,000. The trust had been $650,000. Danielle had clearly spent or moved almost all of it. I called Patricia Voss. You're not implicated in any way, she assured me. The FBI contacted our office to verify your portion of the trust. I confirmed you never received your funds. And they've cleared you. That night, Danielle called, her voice raw from crying. She told me about a man named Marcus Reed, who had presented himself as a venture capital manager with polished paperwork and glowing references, promising to double her money within 2 years. She had wired the funds without verifying any of it. No background check. No call to a licensed financial advisor. Nothing. You moved $500,000 without doing any due diligence. I said quietly. I trusted him. I thought I was growing the family's wealth. I was going to tell you once it doubled, give you your share and more. That was never yours to gamble with. Danielle. Half of it was mine. My father called the next morning, asking me to vouch for Danielle's character to investigators. I told him character references don't matter in a fraud case, evidence does. 2 years ago I warned you both about irregularities in the books. I reminded him. You called me paranoid. Now you want my help. He didn't have an answer. I told him I was sorry. And I meant it. But I couldn't fix what had already been set in motion. Danielle had made her choices. Now she had to face them. Part 7: Consequences. I want to pause and ask you honestly, do you think I should have stepped in to help, or is there a point where protecting yourself has to come first? Even when it's family, I read every comment. So tell me what you think. That evening, I wrote one final email to my parents and sister, laying out clearly that I had not reported anyone, that I had simply told the truth when the estate attorney asked, and that I would not be involving myself in the legal case. I wrote that I hoped it resolved as fairly as possible, but that I would not participate. My mother replied within minutes times, "You're heartless." My father never replied at all. Danielle wrote times, "I'll never forgive you for this." 2 months later, the story became public. Danielle was formally charged with participating in a fraudulent investment scheme. Her attorney maintained she had been a victim who cooperated fully with investigators. As part of a plea agreement, she avoided prison but was ordered to pay $150,000 in fines, complete 400 hours of community service, and was barred from managing investment accounts for 5 years. The family home and the business were both listed for sale to cover the costs. I read the article 3 times. No prison, that was something. But the business my father had spent 3 decades building was gone. The house I grew up in was gone. My grandmother's trust was gone. And so, it seemed, was any version of my family that had room for me. I felt no satisfaction. Only a deep, quiet sadness that it had come to this. 3 weeks after the sentencing, Patricia Voss called again. The court has approved redistribution of your grandmother's estate according to the original will. You'll receive your designated portion. Unfortunately, because so much was already spent, we can only recover about $200,000 total from what remains, but that full amount is yours. She also told me I had the legal right to sue my parents and sister for the rest, plus damages, and would likely win. I thought about it for exactly 10 seconds. I don't want to sue. I told her, I don't want to spend the next few years fighting them in court. I just want what my grandmother meant for me to have. The money arrived on a Thursday morning in the fall. I stared at the number on my banking app for a long time, waiting to feel triumphant. Instead, I just felt tired. My mother texted for the first time in 2 months. Times I see you got the money. I hope you're happy now. Not times I'm sorry. Not times we were wrong. Just an accusation dressed up as a question. Danielle never reached out at all, but my cousin Melissa did. I always thought it was unfair how they treated you. She wrote, I'm glad you got what Grandma left you. You deserved it. An old friend from high school messaged me too. I don't know the whole story, but I know your family hasn't been fair to you for years. I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. That message made me cry more than anything else had in months. I used the money carefully. First, I paid off every cent of my remaining student loans, $38,000. Gone in a single click. For the first time since I was 22, I owed nothing to anyone. Then I put a down payment on a small one-bedroom condo of my own, a place no one could ever take from me. I set up a scholarship in my grandmother's name at my old university, $40,000. Earmarked for first-generation college students who, like me, were doing it alone. The rest I put into savings. Not for anything specific. Just for breathing room. For the future. I didn't buy anything extravagant. I didn't announce it online. I sat in my new kitchen with a cup of tea, looking out over the city, and felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time: freedom. Some people might say I should have helped my sister when she was in trouble. That family means showing up no matter what. But I learned something important through all of this. Love without respect isn't love. It's exploitation. And boundaries aren't cruelty. They're self-preservation. I didn't win in the way movies show it. I didn't get my family back. I didn't get an apology. I didn't get validation. But I got myself back, the version of me who understands that my worth was never up for a vote at that conference table. If there's one thing I hope you take from my story, it's this: boundaries are not mean. And they are not selfish. They're how you teach people what you will and won't accept. For years, I believed that if I just kept showing up, kept being patient, kept proving myself, eventually my family would see me. But people who have already decided not to see you never will. That isn't your failure. It's theirs. I didn't report my sister. I didn't sabotage anyone. I didn't seek revenge. I simply stopped protecting people from the consequences of their own choices, and when those consequences arrived, I let them land where they landed. Last month, an email showed up in my inbox from Danielle. No subject line. I stared at it for a long moment, my finger hovering over open, then over delete. In the end, I did neither. I moved it into a folder labeled Times Later Times and closed my laptop. Maybe someday I'll read it. Maybe it will say she's sorry. Maybe it won't. But today, I don't need to know. I've built a life I'm proud of, a job I'm good at, a home that's mine, friends who actually see me. I have peace. And that peace doesn't depend on whether my family ever understands what they did. If my family ever wants to be part of my life again, they'll have to meet me here, not where I used to be. Small and accommodating and desperate for approval. But here, steady, boundaried, and finally, completely free. If this story meant something to you, I'd love to hear which part hit hardest. Leave it in the comments below. And if you've ever had to choose peace over people who didn't deserve you, you're not alone. Thank you for listening.